Kevin Deal here, and on today's episode we're going to be doing an in-depth review of the Canon RF50mm F1.2 USM L. It's a long name. Thanks for joining me today. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at some of my work that I've done with the 50mm 1.2. I think it's a fantastic lens. 50mm is your normal field of view. It has a perfect balance between your subject and your environment. And of course, at 1.2, it has incredible isolation. I thought it'd be great to kick off today's episode with a slideshow of some photo examples, because as you know, if you follow this channel, I don't do technical reviews where I take pictures of charts and all that. There's already some great channels for that. I don't do too much pixel peeping. I just look at photo examples. I see how the tool works for my work, and hopefully these photo examples will help you determine as to whether or not the RF50mm 1.2 is right for you. So I have in my hand here the Canon RF50mm f1.2. It's a really beautiful lens. I'm sure if you're watching this video and you have the money to pay for this lens, you probably already know 50mm is about what we see with our eyes, and a lot of you love that focal length, and that's probably another reason why you're here. So let's talk about what I love about this lens. Compared to the other RF L lenses like the 28-70 and the 85, this is actually a pretty light lens. It's a little over 2 pounds. I think it's like 2.09 pounds, something like that. So it's a little lighter, it's a little easier on my tennis elbow, and it's fun to carry around when you want that perfect happy medium between environment and isolation and getting the subject kind of close to the camera. Like all Canon lenses in the RF mount, it has the control ring, which you can assign to shutter speed, aperture, white balance, whatever you want. It's pretty cool. This chunk of glass is actually a standard 77mm, which is great. Most of the other large RF lenses are 95mm, 87mm. 77 is a standard thread size, which is great because you probably already have like a CPL filter or maybe an ND filter for your video rig that's the same size. If you have like a 24-105 or you have a 14-35, they all use the 77mm filter thread, which shares the same size as the 50. So I'm working with the lovely Meredith Thomas today. We're gonna be doing a really cool shoot for Poorbaby Fashion, and she's gonna say hello. She's not wired up, so you're not gonna hear her. But yeah, we're gonna use this field. What I'm trying to accomplish here, I wanna get kind of a dramatic effect with the clouds. So what I may do is I may need to use a neutral density filter on my prime lenses to slow down the light and then compensate with flash to make the subject stand out. We'll see what kind of results we get. I may abandon it and just go to like more of a natural look, but this is why we like to experiment and come up with cool ideas for these editorial shoots. The weather is changing quite a bit, so that's a challenge I'm facing at the moment. Now Meredith looked right at me, just like that. Beautiful. Loving that. I'm gonna do the same shot, but I'm gonna pull my flash back just a little bit. Sometimes I don't want to wash out that fair skin. We want to be able to recover our highlights. Here we go, have that hair blown off to the side like that. Gorgeous. I go a tiny bit lower on my flash because I don't want it to look too fake. Beautiful. Let me get one more, just like that. I'm gonna get one through the weeds while I still can. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. So, who is this lens for? It's for people whose bread and butter is shooting 50mm. If you just love the 50mm focal length, it's your favorite, and it's your money-making focal length, this is the lens for you. This lens is for portrait photographers. This lens is for senior photographers, senior portrait pictures where you want to see a little bit of environment, you want to see a little bit of the subject. Not really as much for headshots as the 85, but some people do like headshots with a 50mm. So if you're one of those headshot photographers who love a 50mm focal length, this thing is awesome. When you stop it down to like 5.6 or 6.3 in the studio, it is absolutely stunningly sharp. I'll show you some examples of some more artsy stuff I've done with it. Just like the 85, I feel like the look, subjectively speaking, all these images look like they belong on a wall. They're just super artistic, and it just has a very gorgeous look. Now, if you're a prime shooter and you like to do weddings, this is going to be great for that, but I do encourage you to check out my review of the Canon RF14-35 f2, which I actually use instead of this lens on events like weddings. And while I know that this would produce stunning images for street photography, it's not very discreet, even though it does let in the low light. You may want to try a smaller lens for that. But if you do find yourself using it for street photography, of course, like all L lenses, it comes with weather sealing, so nothing to worry about there. The 50mm uses the air sphere coatings to give it part of its beautiful look. It has a really lightning fast USM motor, and it just all works together with the 10-blade diaphragm to produce some absolutely stunning bokeh. Obviously, the further back you get away from your subject, the harder it is to liquefy and the less compression you have. For 50mm, this produces an incredible amount of bokeh. I'll show you some examples as I'm talking, and you can determine whether or not you think that this is the right amount of bokeh for you. Just like the 85 EF 1.2 that I talked about in my RF 85mm 1.2 video, and I'll leave a link in the description below. Its predecessor was incredibly slow, incredibly soft, and produced a lot of purple fringing and chromatic aberration. Now, that could be something that you like. Some people actually love the softer look of the older lenses. I'm not here to tell you which one's better. I'm just telling you that this more modern design has better contrast, wide open. It doesn't lose the contrast. If you're shooting into the sun, the coatings don't lose contrast very easily. It's incredibly sharp. The older lenses were not sharp wide open. You'd have to stop them down to like f5.6. And you know, once you get a 50mm and you start stopping it down to 5.6, you lose a lot of that background blur. You can shoot this thing wide open at 1.2 and it looks absolutely stunning. Another pro of this and all the RF L lenses is that they're durable. I told you the story about how I dropped my 85 on the driveway. Well, this guy fell down off of a table in my studio and hit a concrete floor. Nothing happened to it. It's totally fine, no scratches, no cracks, nothing. That is what you pay for. And pay for it you will. This lens comes in at $2,300. $2,300 for a lot of people is a lot of money. And I totally understand that. If it's not your moneymaker lens, it may not be the right lens for you. So let me suggest some alternatives. You could get the Sigma 50 1.4, which is our art series. I think it comes in around $900. Really beautiful lens. I recommend it. I used to own it myself. If you don't have that kind of money and you want to go even lower, you can always get the 50 1.8, the nifty 50, in either the RF or the EF mount. You also have alternatives, like you could go for the older EF 1.2 if you do have the money and you want to be about, I don't know, $1,200, $1,300 in the used market. They have discontinued almost all of their EF lenses, so you are going to be at the end of life soon. That could be a good or a bad thing depending on your situation. Maybe the prices will drop. I don't recommend getting the EF 1.4 50mm. I've never liked that lens. It's just my opinion. I think that lens is soft. I always thought that lens was kind of a dud. One thing to keep in mind is that if you're using lenses that utilize the EF mount, whether it be third-party or Canon, you are going to need an EF to RF adapter. I own two of the Canon ones. I own the Viltrox one and have had zero issues with any of them. The autofocus and everything works just like it's supposed to. Cons, once again, if you're weight sensitive, even though compared to the 85 and the 28-70, this lens is actually kind of light, it's still heavier than most lenses. So just because I opened up by saying that this lens is a little bit lighter, if you're weight sensitive, you may completely disagree with me and say that this is way too much lens for you as far as weight is concerned. Like I said with the 85 1.2, when you're shooting at 1.2, you let in so much light that even at 1/8,000th of a second, you're too bright. You're blowing out highlights, especially at like 2 p.m. So you may have to purchase a 2 to 5 stop neutral density filter for this. I went with a Freewell 77mm. As I said earlier, one of the pros is that it's a 77mm filter thread, which is a more common filter thread size, and you can actually probably find neutral density filters for considerably cheaper for this lens than I could for my 85, which is a more unique 87mm, or for my 28-70, which sometimes also needs a neutral density filter, and it's 95mm, and those neutral density filters are like a couple $100. So having a 77mm filter thread is actually a really cool feature of this lens. Like the 28-70 and the 85mm, this lens does not have image stabilization. It could be a problem for you. If you buy this lens, you're probably buying it to shoot it at 1.2 or f2 or something like that anyway, so I don't really see you running into an issue where you're gonna need IS. The newer bodies, the R5, the R6 have in-body stabilization. They probably give you 3 to 5 stops of stabilization as it is. So unless you're just like doing night photography and you need to do like a half a second exposure, this is probably gonna be fine for you. Which leads me to video. For video, this lens, once again, I'd probably put it on a tripod because it doesn't have the image stabilization. It's probably not good for handheld run and gun work. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So let me tell you about my final thoughts on the RF50mm 1.2 L USM. If 50mm is your primary focal length that you use, you like that perfect balance between environment and isolating the subject, well, I'd say if you're a professional, absolutely buy this lens. This lens is incredible. It was not the first lens that I bought because my primary focal length that I use the most is 85mm. And then I do find that when I'm at like 28, 35, and 50, I don't necessarily always need to be wide open at 1.2. So I bought the 85 first, I bought the 28-70 second, and then I bought this guy third. He was worth every penny because I do editorials, I do lots of artsy shoots with models. So this definitely does improve my work, but I just want to let you know that depending on what you do, this may or may not be a perfect lens for you. It definitely worked out for me, but as I said, it was much further down on my pecking order. So anyway, thanks for watching the video today. I hope it was educational. I hope it helped. Check out Meredith Thomas. I'm going to leave a link in the description below for her Instagram. And also, if you love this channel, if you love what I'm doing here, the channel is slowly growing, but it is growing. Please click the like and subscribe button below. Leave comments. Tell me about whether or not you feel that the 50mm 1.2 is worth it for you. And until next time, I'll see you. Bye.